The Texas sun beat down hard on the dusty ground of Bar T Ranch, casting sharp shadows on the wooden fence of the round pen. A dry breeze carried the scent of hay, sweat, and old leather. Inside the pen, a powerful chestnut stallion moved restlessly, muscles rippling beneath his coat. His ears twitched, and his hooves struck the dirt in warning. Cowboys lined the rails, their arms crossed, brows furrowed. This horse wasn't just wild. He was something else entirely. 2 seasoned ranch hands had already tried to break him. Both had hit the dirt hard. The stallion had shown no signs of fear, no submission, only a quiet fury burning in his eyes. No brand marked his hide, and he came with no papers. Just a weathered note tied to the saddle when he was found tied to the ranch gate at dawn. "Good luck." "This horse don't want a rider," muttered Dale Carson, a weathered cowboy who had seen just about everything in his 62 years. "He wants to be left alone." The men nodded silently, none willing to step forward next. Then, just as the tension peaked, a small figure stepped through the gate. A young boy, maybe 8 years old, wearing a stiff denim shirt tucked into jeans too big for his frame and a white cowboy hat that drooped slightly over his brow. His boots kicked up dust as he walked straight into the pen, no hesitation, no fear in his stride. The stallion paused. His ears turned forward, eyes fixed on the boy. He didn't rear, didn't charge, just watched. The boy stopped a few feet away and slowly raised his hand. His voice was barely above a whisper. "You're scared too. I can feel it." For a moment, no one breathed. The horse took one cautious step forward. Then another. His powerful body, so tense moments ago, seemed to soften. He lowered his head and gently sniffed the boy's outstretched fingers. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. From the fence, the cowboys stared in disbelief. "Who is that kid?" one of them asked quietly. Hank Dillard, owner of Bar T Ranch and a man known for never showing much emotion, squinted toward the pen. "That's my grandson," he said slowly. "Eli. But I've never seen him go near a horse before. Not once. And yet here he was, in front of the most untamable horse they'd ever seen. Come, Sil. As if he'd done it 1,000 times before. And for the first time since arriving, the horse didn't look alone. The silence in the round pen was thicker than the Texas heat. Dusty, the wild stallion, kept his head low, nostrils flaring softly as he inhaled the boy's scent. Eli stood still, hand outstretched, his eyes calm and unreadable. Around them, the murmurs of stunned cowboys turned to silence again. It was as if they all sensed it. Something had just shifted. Dusty wasn't just allowing the boy near. He was choosing him. Hank Dillard didn't move from the fence. His jaw was tight, arms crossed, but his eyes flicked between the horse and the boy as if trying to make sense of something. Claire stood a few feet behind him now, having rushed from the main house when she heard the commotion. Her breath caught when she saw her son standing inches from the animal that had bucked grown men into the dirt. "Eli," she called, panic cutting through her voice. But Eli didn't flinch. He didn't even look back. "He's fine," Hank muttered, eyes still locked on the pen. "That horse trusts him. And I'll be damned if I understand why." Claire turned sharply. "What are you talking about? You were the one who said Dusty needed to be put down before he hurt someone." Her voice shook, not just with anger, but with something older. Something unresolved. "I still believe it," Hank replied. "But now I don't know what to believe." Inside the pen, Dusty began circling Eli slowly, his massive frame tense but controlled. The boy turned with him, quietly, as if they were dancing. No ropes, no reins, no fear. Just 2 wounded spirits recognizing something familiar in each other. The cowboys were speechless. Dale Carson leaned against the post, eyes narrowed with the weight of understanding. He'd seen bonds like this before, once. A long time ago. Later that evening, Claire sat with Eli on the back porch of the ranch house. The sun dipped low, casting a golden hue over the dry fields. Eli sat quietly, legs swinging off the edge, his eyes distant. Claire watched him for a while before speaking. "You've never even been near a horse, baby. What happened today?" Eli hesitated, then said something she wasn't ready for. "He's not just a horse, Mom. He remembers Dad." Claire froze. The words hit her like a slap. She hadn't spoken Luke's name aloud in years, not since the accident. But now, her son sat beside her, talking about a connection that made no sense. Or maybe, one that made all the sense in the world. That night, after everyone had gone inside, Eli wandered back out to the barn. The stars above Dusty Creek stretched endlessly, a blanket of quiet above the sleeping ranch. Crickets sang in the fields, and the distant howls of coyotes echoed in the dark. But inside the barn, all was still, except for the soft shuffling of hooves. Dusty stood in his stall, restless but alert. When Eli approached, the stallion turned and stepped forward without hesitation. Eli didn't bring sugar cubes or carrots. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, hand on the wooden gate, watching Dusty as if listening for something. "I see you," Eli whispered. "You remember him, don't you?" Dusty blinked slowly, lowered his head, and rested it briefly on the boy's shoulder. It wasn't just trust, it was familiarity. As if something inside the horse had been waiting for this boy all along. Back in the main house, Claire stood by the window, watching her son through the sheer curtain. Her mind raced. She hadn't told Eli much about Luke. Just the bare bones, that his father was a horseman, that he died in a riding accident. She'd kept the deeper truth buried, the emotional scars, the questions, the unfinished pieces of their story. Now, watching Eli connect with a horse that no one could tame, she felt a tremor of something old stirring again. Guilt? Regret? Or maybe just fear that the past wasn't done with them yet. The next morning, Hank found Claire in the kitchen, nursing a cold cup of coffee. His face was drawn, tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. "We need to talk," he said plainly. "About Dusty. About Luke." Claire looked up, weary. "Now you want to talk? After all these years?" Hank sat across from her, elbows on the table, eyes steady. "That horse isn't just some stray. I think Luke trained him." Claire's heart skipped. "That's impossible. Dusty's younger than that. He would have been a foal when Luke died." "Exactly," Hank said. "And Luke was working with a mare at the time. She vanished after the accident. I never put it together until now." Later that day, Dale Carson pulled an old photo from a drawer in the tack room. It showed Luke Dillard standing beside a young, fiery-eyed mare, Dusty's mother. The resemblance was unmistakable. "He's got her eyes," Dale muttered. "And the fire, too." For the first time, the puzzle pieces began to shift. Dusty wasn't just a wild horse. He was a legacy. And Eli wasn't just a boy drawn to a mystery. He was part of it. The wind had picked up by mid-afternoon, sweeping dry leaves across the yard and rattling the old shutters on the ranch house. Eli sat alone on the fence near the round pen, watching Dusty graze just beyond the gate. He didn't speak, didn't call out. He just observed, the way someone watches a fire burn low but steady. Dusty occasionally lifted his head, ears flicking in Eli's direction, but neither of them needed words. Whatever existed between them was deeper than that. Inside the house, Claire paced the floor of her childhood bedroom, now lined with boxes she never unpacked when she left over a decade ago. She pulled one down from the top shelf, an old cardboard container marked Luke's Things. Inside, beneath rodeo flyers and belt buckles, was a notebook. It was worn, the cover soft from years of handling. When she opened it, her breath caught. Page after page in Luke's handwriting, training notes, observations, sketches of horses, and one name circled more than once, Dust Storm, a foal he'd been raising in secret. Claire sank onto the edge of the bed, notebook trembling in her hands. Dust Storm. Dusty. Her father had kept this from her. For years. A horse that had belonged to Luke. A connection to the man she'd loved and lost. She didn't know whether to cry or scream. Meanwhile, Hank stood alone in the barn, staring at an empty stall. It had belonged to the mare Luke trained, the one who vanished the night of the accident. Guilt pressed down on him like a storm cloud. He had always blamed Luke for that night, for the recklessness, the stubborn pride. But now, cracks were forming in that version of the story. Maybe Luke hadn't been careless. Maybe he'd been protecting something, or someone. Back at the fence, Bo Reyes approached Eli. The young cowboy's boots kicked up dust as he walked, shoulders tense. "You think you're special, huh? Just 'cause that horse lets you near." Eli looked up, calm but steady. Bo scoffed, clearly irritated by the boy's silence. "That horse needs a real trainer, not some weird kid playing cowboy." Before Eli could answer, Dusty trotted up, placing himself between the boy and Bo. The message was clear. Bo froze, then turned and walked off, his pride bruised deeper than he'd admit. That evening, Claire found her father on the back porch. She held out the notebook. "You knew, didn't you?" Hank looked down at it, the weight of memory flooding his expression. "I knew," he said. "But I didn't know it would come back like this." The sky above Bar T Ranch turned gray by early evening, thick clouds rolling in as if the land itself sensed the shift unfolding beneath it. Rain hadn't touched Dusty Creek in weeks, but now the air was heavy, electric with something more than weather. Eli stood in the open barn doorway, staring out at the distant hills. Behind him, Dusty paced slowly inside his stall, restless, like a memory trying to surface. Claire sat at the kitchen table, the worn notebook still in front of her. Her eyes scanned Luke's last entries, and one phrase kept echoing, "If anything happens to me, the horse knows. He'll find who he needs." She whispered the words out loud, her voice cracking as if saying them made it more real. She had spent years burying questions about Luke's death, and now, with each scribbled page, the past clawed its way back into the light. In the barn, Hank approached Eli, his hat in hand. He looked older today, not just tired, but worn by regrets. He leaned against the post, eyes on Dusty. "He's your father's horse," he said quietly. "Luke raised him from birth. Kept it quiet. Said he wanted the colt to grow up without fear." Eli didn't answer. He didn't have to. The pain in Hank's voice was new, vulnerable. "I blamed him, you know," Hank continued. "For everything. For leaving. For dying. But I think I was just mad he didn't become me." Eli finally turned to him, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to become you either." The word stung, but Hank didn't flinch. He just nodded, as if he'd been waiting to hear them his whole life. Meanwhile, Dale Carson and Claire stood by the tack room, going through the rest of Luke's belongings. Among the saddle straps and buckles, Claire found a folded piece of paper tucked inside an old boot, a letter. Addressed to Hank. Unopened. She stared at it for a long moment before handing it to him. "He wrote you," she said. "You just never opened it." Back at the barn, Dusty grew restless, pawing at the stall floor. Eli stepped inside without hesitation, laying a hand on the horse's neck. The wind outside picked up, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Eli closed his eyes. Something was changing, in the horse, in the ranch, in all of them. And somewhere deep inside, he felt it, the story wasn't over. It was just beginning to surface. The rain tapped lightly on the tin roof of the barn, steady and rhythmic, like the beating of an old heart. Eli stayed close to Dusty's side, his hand resting gently on the horse's flank. The stallion didn't move. He stood calm, breathing slowly, almost mirroring the boy. Outside, the rest of the ranch seemed to hold its breath. Something had shifted, not just in the weather, but in the air between people. Inside the house, Hank sat at the kitchen table, the unopened letter from Luke lying in front of him. The paper had yellowed slightly with time, the edges worn. His fingers trembled as he finally broke the seal. Claire stood quietly in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her father's face as he began to read. The words hit harder than he expected, words of love, frustration, apology, but above all, understanding. Luke had never intended to leave the ranch. He was building something his own way. Dust Storm was part of that dream. He wasn't trying to defy you, Claire said softly, as Hank finished reading. He just didn't want to live in your shadow. I know, Hank whispered. His voice cracked under the weight of all the things he hadn't said when there was still time. I didn't know how to love him without control. Out in the yard, Dale Carson was fixing a broken gate when Bo Reyes approached, still fuming from his encounter with Eli. This ain't right, Bo muttered. A kid like that shouldn't be messing with a horse like Dusty. It's dangerous. Dale didn't look up. He kept hammering, calm as always. That horse ain't dangerous, Bo, he said. He's just been waiting on the right hands. And they showed up, whether you like it or not. Back in the barn, Dusty stirred suddenly, lifting his head high and letting out a deep, echoing snort. His eyes flashed toward the open door as if something, or someone, had just crossed an invisible line. Eli stepped back, startled but not afraid. Dusty wasn't panicking. He was remembering. The smell of the rain, the barn, the voices in the distance, they were all pulling him backward through time. Claire appeared at the stall door a moment later, drenched from the rain. She looked at her son, her voice unsteady. He was yours too, she said. Your father raised him, but maybe Dusty was always meant to find you. And Eli, still soaking wet and wide-eyed, nodded once. Somehow, deep inside, he already knew. The storm rolled deeper into the night, lightning flashing across the sky like old memories refusing to stay buried. Inside the barn, Dusty paced with a nervous energy, ears twitching, hooves striking the ground in uneven rhythms. Eli stood near the stall, calm but alert, speaking in a low, steady voice. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." But something about the air had changed. Dusty wasn't just reacting to the rain. He was sensing something no one else could feel. Claire stood behind her father in the living room, watching as Hank stared blankly into the fire. The letter from Luke rested in his lap, its words still echoing inside him. "You knew he was different," Claire said, her voice low. "But you couldn't accept it. You pushed him away." Hank's eyes didn't move. "I was trying to make him strong," he said. "To carry the ranch, the legacy. But I didn't see what I was doing until it was too late." Claire stepped closer. "You broke him, Dad. And when he needed you most, you weren't there. I wasn't either." Her voice cracked. "We both lost him. And now Eli's picking up the pieces we left behind." Meanwhile, Bo Reyes was at the edge of the property, rain soaking through his jacket as he stood near the paddock. Frustration burned inside him. He'd spent years trying to earn respect around here, riding harder, working longer, and now all anyone talked about was the kid and his miracle horse. "This ain't right," he muttered to himself. But beneath the anger was something smaller, quieter, envy. Because deep down, Bo knew Eli hadn't done anything flashy or forced. He had simply connected. And Bo had never known how to do that. Inside the barn, something unexpected happened. Dusty stopped pacing and turned sharply toward the far wall, a place no one had paid attention to in years. With a sudden snort, He slammed his hoof against a loose board again and again, until the old wood cracked and fell away. Behind it, hidden in a hollowed-out section of the wall, was a weathered leather satchel. Eli approached carefully, heart pounding. He pulled it out and opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photos, old notebooks, and a voice recorder. Claire and Hank arrived just as Eli hit play. Luke's voice crackled through the barn, warm, strong, full of life. "If you're hearing this, then dust storm made it home." And just like that, the barn fell silent, except for the sound of 3 hearts breaking all over again. The recorder hissed for a moment, then Luke's voice returned, steady and full of quiet emotion. "I don't know who'll find this, but if dust storm made it back, it means I didn't. I just hope someone's listening." Eli sat on the floor of the barn, the satchel open beside him, surrounded by the scent of old leather and sawdust. Claire knelt next to him, tears streaking her cheeks, while Hank stood frozen just beyond the stall, his face pale and unreadable. Luke's voice continued. "Dust storm was never meant to be just a horse. He was the piece of me I wanted to leave behind, something free, something unbroken. I didn't tell anyone because I knew what they'd say, that I was wasting time, that dreams don't belong on ranches like this." His words cut through the air like thunder. Hank flinched but said nothing. The weight of silence said everything. Claire reached for another item in the bag, a black and white photo of Luke as a young man, holding a newborn colt in his arms. His face was softer than either she or Hank remembered. Hopeful. "He wasn't just trying to raise a horse," Claire whispered. "He was trying to raise a future." Dusty stepped closer, nudging the recorder with his nose, as if recognizing the voice, as if confirming everything they now knew. Eli placed a hand on the stallion's muzzle. "He remembers," he said simply. "He never forgot." Claire wrapped her arms around her son, holding him tightly, but her eyes never left the photo in her lap. Hank finally moved, walking over to the stall. His voice was rough, like gravel. "He recorded that in this barn, and I never even knew." He looked at Claire, then Eli, and then Dusty. "I spent so many years trying to protect this land, this name. I never realized what I was destroying to do it." His voice broke. "He was building something real, and I tore it down." Eli looked up at him, eyes soft but serious. "You still have time to fix it." It wasn't a command. It wasn't a plea. Just a truth, spoken without judgment. Dusty exhaled deeply, his body relaxing for the first time in days. The storm outside began to quiet, as if the worst had finally passed. In the flickering light of the barn, surrounded by rain and memory, the family sat together, broken, maybe, but no longer lost. The next morning brought a stillness over Bar T Ranch that no one had felt in years. The storm had passed, leaving behind damp earth, washed-out trails, and a strange clarity in the air, like the land itself had exhaled. Birds chirped hesitantly, testing the new calm. In the barn, Eli brushed Dusty's coat in slow, gentle strokes. The horse stood completely still, his eyes half closed, breathing in rhythm with the boys. They were no longer strangers. They were part of the same story now. Claire watched from the barn door, arms crossed over her chest. She had barely slept. Her mind kept replaying Luke's voice on that recorder, the quiet strength, the longing, the pain she hadn't seen at the time. For so long, she had tried to protect Eli by hiding the past. But now, she understood, Eli didn't need protection from it. He needed to grow through it, with it. She wiped her eyes and whispered to herself, "He's stronger than I ever gave him credit for." In the house, Hank sat at the kitchen table, staring at the open notebook and the worn photo of his son with the foal. His coffee had gone cold again. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about cattle prices or fence repairs. He was thinking about Luke's laugh. The way he used to hum while working leather. The way he always looked toward the horizon like he saw something worth chasing. And now, somehow, that spark had landed in Eli. Dale Carson entered quietly and placed a small object on the table, an old silver concho from Luke's saddle. Found this in the tack room. Figured it belonged with the rest of him. Hank picked it up slowly, his fingers trembling. "I didn't deserve to be his father," he said softly. Dale looked at him, expression firm. "Then be the grandfather that boy deserves." Later that afternoon, Hank walked out to the barn. Claire and Eli were there, preparing Dusty for his first proper ride. Not with a bit, not with force, just a saddle and quiet trust. Hank approached them carefully, his voice low. "Mind if I watch?" Claire nodded, surprised but hopeful. Eli looked up, meeting his grandfather's eyes. "You can ride with me," he said. Hank hesitated, then nodded. "If he'll let me." Dusty stood still as Hank approached. Slowly, cautiously, the old man laid a hand on the stallion's neck. Dusty didn't move. And just like that, a door Hank thought was forever closed creaked open. The sun dipped low over Bar T Ranch, casting a golden light across the open fields. The air was calm now, the kind of quiet that settles after a long storm, not just the one from the sky, but the ones that live inside people. Eli sat tall in the saddle, Dusty beneath him, steady and calm. Beside them, Hank rode on an old chestnut mare he hadn't touched in years. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't chasing anything. He was just present. Claire watched from the porch, arms wrapped around herself. There was pain in her, there always would be. But there was also pride. She saw it in the way Eli handled Dusty, not with force or dominance, but with patience and respect. It reminded her of Luke, not just his hands, but his heart. For so long, she thought losing Luke meant losing everything he stood for. But now she realized Luke hadn't vanished. He had passed it on. They rode slowly along the edge of the pasture, Hank and Eli, saying little. Words weren't needed. The wind rustled the tall grass, and the soft clop of hooves filled the silence with something comforting. Hank glanced over at his grandson. "You're different than me," he said finally. "And that's a good thing." Eli smiled. "I know." For a man like Hank, those words were more than an apology. They were a beginning. Back at the barn, Dale leaned on the fence, chewing a toothpick and shaking his head with a small smile. "Didn't think I'd live to see the day," he muttered. "That boy's got something special." Bo Reyes, standing beside him, didn't argue this time. "He does," Bo admitted. "And that horse, he was never meant for someone like me." Dale gave him a sideways look. "None of us were ready. But the right one came along." That evening, Claire tucked Eli into bed, pulling the quilt up around his shoulders. Before turning out the light, she paused at the door. "You made your dad proud today," she said. Eli looked up, sleepy-eyed but serious. "I felt him, out there. Like he was riding with us." Claire nodded, her throat tight. "He was." Outside, Dusty stood alone in the paddock, his head raised to the wind. He was no longer wild. Not because he had been broken, but because someone had finally seen him for who he was. And in doing so, he had found peace. And just like that, what was once lost had finally come home.